All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Errol Spence Jr. and Keith Thurman. Man, it looked like there may be some funny business out in the streets. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about Keith "one-time Thurman" telling the truth as the WBC now makes him the #1 contender for Errol Spence Jr. with the WBC. Before I get to that, though, let me welcome you back to the channel. If you are a longtime subscriber, supporter to the channel, welcome back to the channel. If you are new to the channel, please accept my invitation to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell icon so you can be notified of when we release more videos. All right, man, this is big news. This is big news. Just looked at the WBC rankings, and guess who was telling the truth? That would be Keith "one-time Thurman. And because he is now just passed up Jaron Ennis and is the #1 rated contender by the WBC. Now, what is significant about that? This is exactly what Keith Thurman said he was promised by the WBC before he fought Mario Barrios. If you remember, Keith Thurman said that he was promised to be the mandatory for Errol Spence Jr.'s WBC belt if he beat Mario Barrios. Everybody was in an uproar saying, man, how in the world could it be that Keith Thurman, coming off that long of a layoff, off of a loss to Manny Pacquiao, and then that long a layoff to fight Mario Barrios, would become the mandatory over Jaron Ennis and over Virgil Ortiz for that belt. And the WBC came out, turned around and said, oh, it's not true. It is just a final eliminator, right? It's not that he becomes the mandatory, it's that he becomes the final eliminator, right? However, once he won that fight, he basically jumped from I remember where he was, like #5, jumped to #3 over Jaron Ennis. And now, to complete the package, he has jumped over Virgil Ortiz and into the #1 position with the WBC, which means he is the most likely person to be named the mandatory for Errol Spence Jr. for the WBC. So if Errol Spence Jr. vacates the belt, if he doesn't fight Terrence Crawford, if he vacates the belt, Keith Thurman will be there to fight for that vacant belt, being in the #1 position. If Errol Spence Jr. decides not to move up to 154 pounds because there's not immediately a title shot available for him, more than likely the WBC will order Errol Spence Jr. to fight Keith Thurman. That is my prediction because the WBC is like that. That's the only way that I can say that they are like that. I definitely believe that Errol Spence Jr. versus Keith Thurman fight is something that all parties are interested in and want, with the grand exception of Errol Spence Jr. himself. And let me explain why I believe that to be the case. First and foremost, I think that the PBC would prefer that fight because that is a fight that can work monetarily for them. It is not as expensive a fight as Errol Spence and Terrence Crawford. And more importantly than that, no matter which way that fight goes, Errol Spence Jr. or Keith Thurman, whoever wins, the PBC will still have those belts, that belt with them, and the other 2 belts that would come with it, which would be the IBF and the WBA. So it works for the WB. It definitely works for the PBC. I think that Showtime would think that fight is less of a risk than Terrence Crawford because those guys are not going to be asking for, let me put it this way. If they are able to make a fight between Keith Thurman and Manny Pacquiao like they did for that for the WBA belt that Keith Thurman held, they are going to be able to make a fight find enough money for a Manny Pack, for an Errol Spence Jr. Keith Thurman fight for that WBC belt. Because it is an in-house fight, and those are fighters that they have aired in the past and probably have more faith in their ability to draw pay-per-views. And from the negotiations, at least from the way it looks from a very far outside looking in, it looks like it's a significantly less expensive venture for the PBC and for Showtime. Now, as far as what Terrence Crawford, what this means for Terrence Crawford, I mean, obviously Errol Spence Jr. is the glue that is holding the hopes of that Terrence Crawford fight together. And it's no guarantee that Errol Spence Jr. will fight Keith Thurman, even if Keith Thurman is mandatory. Right now, I have heard Errol Spence Jr. waffle a little bit on that, but previously he said, "Look, man, I'm not fighting Keith Thurman. Keith Thurman is somebody that did not give me an opportunity for fight for the belt when I was in position to get it. And so he doesn't feel like he wants to fight Keith Thurman or, make Keith Thurman go through what Keith Thurman put him through. That very well may be the case. However, I do believe in what's the word, man? I want to say cooperation. What do you call it when you when you are working in cahoots with somebody, right? I believe that goes. Collusion is the word I'm looking for. Collusion in boxing. I am 100% believer of collusion in boxing, and these guys positioning fights to get the fights that they want to get. They've been wanting to get the Errol Spence Jr. Keith Thurman fight. Keith Thurman is actually somebody that may have a fan base that is as big as Terrence Crawford's, even though the conversation about the boxing matches is not anywhere about a fight between them at this point in time is nowhere near as feverish. I think people would be really, really surprised to see how many Keith one-time fans that there really are out there, man, and how sellable a fight that is for those guys at a reasonable rate. Now, I personally would prefer the Errol Spence Jr. Terrence Crawford fight, but the WBC, I'm telling you, man, these guys are real funny business. They're no different than the WBO is with Bob Arum, where the WBO will find miraculous ways to order fights and do things that boxing fans don't see coming, because they work in cooperation, not necessarily collusion, with the promoters. And I think that same situation was the case with the WBC and Don King. Don King used to be able to get all kind of stuff done with the WBC. And I think that more than likely Al Heyman and these guys will be able to do that again. I've never really been a big believer that those guys want that Errol Spence Jr. Terrence Crawford fight. I think it's just something that they can't avoid the conversation, because these guys are clearly the two best guys in that division. But as Leonard Ellerby said, man, some of these fights that a whole lot of people think are big, the PBC doesn't necessarily think are that big, and they are not above forcing the hand of an in-house fight. But that is wild how Keith Thurman rose those ranks, went to number 3, and then jumped all the way now to number 1. Bypassed Virgil Ortiz, who I do believe is number 1 at the time. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.